with my people, checking in with my people. Like, share, subscribe. What's going on with my people, checking in with my people? Like, share, subscribe. What's going on with my people, checking in with my people? Like, share, subscribe. Because the party don't start till we step in. Big salute, big salute, big salute, big salute. Big salute to all my loved ones. Support Goon, support squad. Big salute to all my big angels out there. Big salute, angels. I love y'all, my angels. And a big salute to all the righteous revolutionaries out there. Let's go, righteous revolutionaries. Let's go. And big salute to everybody that's tuning in, tapping in for the first time. Hey, make sure you like, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe. Yeah, make sure you like, just hit the like button just because it's the thumbs up and it's there. Please share if you feel any information that's shared here today can be useful for anybody. Yeah, please share. And just automatically hit that subscribe button. Yeah, go ahead, tap that subscribe button. And then you can mosey on along about your day. Come back and check in a little later on. Hit that notification bell so you know when we on here, when the yard is lit. When the yard is lit. Now today, y'all, this is another one for the ancestors, round 3. Um, I found out some things that that I didn't know about. I knew that they were breeding us, our ancestors and our people, but I didn't know it was like this. I didn't know it was like this. I thought it was just on the plantation type of thing. I didn't know it was like the network. And man, look. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. For the ancestors, man. For the ancestors. And forgive me if this touched anybody in the wrong way or have anybody messed up throughout the day, but it's just something to think about. You know, never forget for the ancestors. So let's go. Oh, disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Entertainment, educational purposes only. Let go.
Number 1. Enslaved women were seen as breeding machines and impregnated by several men. One of the most disturbing facts about sex farms during slavery is that enslaved women were seen as little more than breeding machines. Plantation owners and overseers saw them as a means of producing more enslaved people to increase their wealth and power. In order to achieve this goal, enslaved women were often forced to have sex with several men, regardless of their own desires or consent. This practice was particularly prevalent in the Deep South, where the climate and soil were well suited to the cultivation of cotton and the demand for enslaved labor was high. Enslaved women on these plantations were often subjected to brutal physical and sexual abuse, with no hope of escape or redress. They were seen as property rather than human beings, and their bodies were treated as such. The practice of forced breeding was not limited to the Deep South, however. It was also common in other regions of the country, including the Chesapeake Bay area and the Upper South. Plantation owners in these areas also saw enslaved women as a means of increasing their wealth and power and used them accordingly. The evidence for
See how greedy they was? That greed, man, that evil greed. Ooh, that greed to bring evil, pure evil out of people. For the ancestors, let's go.
the forced breeding of enslaved women can be found in a number of historical sources. Plantation records, for example, often include references to enslaved women who were breeders or breeding stock. These records also reveal the number of children produced by these women, as well as their age, health, and other relevant information.
So they got record of this. It's records somewhere, y'all. We need to find out where these records at. Yeah. I know they try to burn up a lot of them, get rid of a lot of them, but we need to find out where these records at. Let's go for the ancestors.
In addition to plantation records, there are also numerous slave narratives that document the experiences of enslaved women who were forced to breed. One such narrative is that of Harriet Jacobs, an enslaved woman who lived in North Carolina in the mid-19th century.
Okay.
In her memoir, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, Jacobs describes the horror of being forced to have sex with her owner in order to produce children. Fact number 2. Female slaves were forced into sexual relationships with their owners or overseers. Sexual abuse of female slaves was widespread during the period of American slavery. Slave women were not only subjected to forced labor, but also to sexual exploitation by their owners and overseers. This practice was not limited to any particular region or plantation.
Yep, because you got what George Washington had a bunch of mixed kids. A lot of first presidents, man, a lot of them folk. Look at Joe Biden and them. Look at his family. They had slaves. Yep, Joe Biden and them family had slaves.
But it was prevalent throughout the American South. The first evidence of sexual abuse of female slaves can be traced back to the transatlantic slave trade. Female slaves were often taken captive and forced to endure the long and arduous journey across the Atlantic in cramped and unsanitary conditions. During this journey, slave women were subjected to sexual abuse by the crew members and the other male slaves. Once in the American South, female slaves were subjected to even more sexual abuse. This abuse took many forms, including rape, forced sexual relationships, and prostitution. Owners and overseers would often take advantage of their power and authority to coerce slave women into sexual relationships. These relationships were often violent and non-consensual, and many slave women were impregnated as a result. The children born from these forced sexual relationships were not considered the children of their fathers, but rather the property of their mother's owners. This meant that these children were also slaves and could be sold or traded just like any other commodity. This practice was particularly common.
That's why you got so many mulattoes. Yeah, mulattoes, them the red bones. Back in the day, red bone was mulatto. And the light-skinned brothers, big salute to my light-skinned brothers and sisters. Yeah, them mulattoes. Dang.
Common in the Upper South, where slaves were bred for sale to the Lower South. One example of this practice can be found in the story of Sally Hemings, a slave woman who was owned by former U.S. President Thomas Jefferson.
What?
Hemings was forced into a sexual relationship with Jefferson, and she gave birth to 6 children, 4 of whom survived to adulthood. These children were not recognized as Jefferson's children during his lifetime, but DNA evidence has since confirmed
Didn't I just say past presidents?
their paternity. Another particularly disturbing example of sexual abuse is the case of Celia, a slave woman who was owned by Robert Newsom in Missouri. Newsom repeatedly raped Celia, and when she became pregnant, he refused to acknowledge the child as his own. When Celia killed Newsom in an act of self-defense, she was tried and convicted of murder and hanged. This case highlights the brutal reality of sexual abuse and violence that
For the ancestors. Yeah, for the ancestors.
many slave women faced in the American South. Fact number 3. The offspring produced on sex farms were separated from their families and sold as soon as they were weaned. The practice of separating families during slavery was widespread, and it was not uncommon for enslaved children to be sold away from their parents. However, on sex farms, this practice was particularly prevalent. Enslaved women who were forced to breed were often impregnated by men who were not their husbands or partners. As a result, the children produced on sex farms were not part of a nuclear family unit, but rather a product to be sold for profit. According to historical records, many plantation owners
See how they did us, like breeding pit bulls or cattle. Damn. Damn. For the ancestors, y'all. Let's go.
saw the sale of enslaved children as a lucrative business opportunity. The price of an enslaved child varied depending on factors such as age, gender, and health, but they were generally sold for a higher price than adult enslaved people. This was because the children had the potential to grow up and become productive laborers, as well as future breeders themselves. In many cases, enslaved children were sold at public auctions, where they would be separated from their mothers and other family members. These auctions were often traumatic for both the enslaved people being sold and those who remained behind. In his book, The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism, historian Edward E. Baptist describes the emotional pain that families experienced when they were separated. Enslaved people wailed and moaned, sobbed and screamed, and many of them ran to the edge of the auction platform, reaching for children or parents or lovers who were being sold away from them. The separation of families on sex farms had long-lasting effects on the enslaved people involved.
Man,
Children who were sold away from their mothers often faced a lifetime of trauma and loss, and parents who were forced to give up their children.
and y'all know a lot of that trauma our people went through was passed down through DNA, what they call classical conditioning. So, you know, we throw it off. Yeah, it passed down through our DNA. Man, post-traumatic slave syndrome. Man,
Children lived with the pain of that separation for the rest of their lives. Fact number 4. Some plantation owners would offer rewards to enslaved men who could impregnate the most women. It may seem unimaginable to think that a person could be rewarded for impregnating multiple women, but this was a reality for some enslaved men on sex farms during slavery. Plantation owners would offer incentives to enslaved men who could produce the most offspring, which would be sold for profit. This practice perpetuated the dehumanization of enslaved people and further cemented their status as property rather than human beings with agency and autonomy. In some cases, plantation owners would even go so far as to pit enslaved men against each other in a competition to impregnate the most women. This not only caused harm to the enslaved women who were forced to participate in this system, but
that's why. Is that why black men try to go from woman to woman? Is that why the more women in America, the more women you hit, you're supposed to bring your status up? Damn, still got that post-traumatic slave syndrome. Is that why everybody asking me, damn, cause you ain't got no wife yet? You ain't got no wife yet. You ain't did it. Post-traumatic slave syndrome. Mm.
also created a toxic environment among enslaved men who were forced to compete with each other for the approval of their enslavers. One example of this can be found in the diary of a plantation owner named James Hammond, who owned several plantations in South Carolina during the mid-1800s. In his diary,
Mm.
Hammond detailed his efforts to breed enslaved people for profit and boasted about the fertility of his enslaved women. He wrote that he offered rewards to the enslaved men who could impregnate the most women, stating that it was a great stimulus for them. This type of behavior is not only morally reprehensible, but it also had lasting consequences for the enslaved people who were forced to participate in the system. The offspring produced in this way were often sold as soon as they were weaned, leading to the separation of families and further dehumanization of enslaved people. Fact number 5. Enslaved women who were deemed to be good breeders were often treated better than those who were not.
Now you know how you be in America. Well, all over the world, man. We got family now. Man, look, but that's okay because the ancestors and the Holy Spirit, the Most High, He bringing all us back together. All the ones that got the same DNA flowing through us, He bringing us back together. So big salute to all my spiritual brothers and sisters. You know, that's part of the DNA. That's just God bringing us all back together. Yeah, for the ancestors. Let's go.
Not. With the abolition of the slave trade, enslavers turned to women to expand the numbers of their slaves. During this time, women were viewed as reproductive machines, and their ability to bear children was a significant factor in determining their value. Enslaved women who were deemed to be good breeders were highly valued, and plantation owners often treated them better than those who were not.
Mm.
According to historian Deirdre Cooper Owens, plantation owners would use various criteria to determine which women were good breeders. Some factors included age, physical attributes, and fertility rates. Enslaved women who met these criteria were forced to have sex with male slaves, often against their will, and were then closely monitored throughout their pregnancies to ensure that they produced healthy offspring. Plantation owners often provided better living conditions and food to enslaved women who were good breeders. They would also give them preferential treatment in terms of work assignments and punishments. This was because the offspring produced by these women were more valuable and profitable for the plantation owner. One example of this can be seen in the life of the famous abolitionist, Harriet Jacobs. Jacobs was enslaved in North Carolina and was forced to have 2 children with her owner, Dr. James Norcom. She was
Oh yeah. We just talked about her.
deemed a good breeder and was treated relatively well compared to other enslaved women on the plantation. However, Jacobs refused to have any more children with Norcom and chose to hide in a small attic space for 7 years to avoid his advances. Despite the preferential treatment that some enslaved women received, they were still subject to the brutal conditions of slavery. They were still considered property and were forced to have sex against their will. Fact number 6. Slave breeding was a profitable business for slave owners and seen as a way to increase the owner's wealth. The breeding of enslaved people allowed plantation owners to increase their wealth by producing more enslaved people without having to pay for additional labor. Plantation owners often kept detailed records of the children born on their farms, noting their age.
Okay, it seemed like he repeating the same thing. Slave breeding was big business for him back in the day. It was big business. Let's see what escape routes.
Before the United States of America truly became united,
This disclaimer. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Entertainment and educational purposes only. Let's go.
there was a great division. What stood in between the North, which would later become the Union, and the South, known as the Confederacy, was the institution of slavery. The Southern states relied heavily on slave labor to cultivate their cash crops, viewed slavery as morally wrong and in violation of human rights, and a step to the only source of hope for escape. Required bravery, ingenuity to the next until they reached freedom. These safe houses were often located in private homes or other discreet locations and were known as stations along the Underground network. The origins of the Underground Railroad can be traced back to the late 18th century, but it gained prominence in the years leading up to the American Civil War in the mid-19th century. Many abolitionists, both black and white, worked together to provide food, shelter, and transportation to those who sought to escape slavery. These brave individuals risked imprisonment, fines, and even violence to help enslaved individuals escape to freedom. One of the most remarkable things about the Underground Railroad was its ability to operate in secret. Despite the
For the ancestors, man. Hold on. It was something else I was looking for. It was something else I was looking for. Yeah, the records. We need to find the records. Finding our ancestors. Ooh, what this say? Hold on. Disclaimer. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Entertainment and educational purposes only. Let's go for the ancestors.
Hello. Welcome to History and Genealogy's virtual classroom. Today is the 20th.
Speed it up a little bit.
And I always like to begin this talk with this quote from D. Palmer Wooter in her book, Finding a Place Called Home, A Guide to African American Genealogy and Historical Identity. And the quote is as follows: "There is no such thing as an anonymous slave or a slave without history." Let's parse this a little bit. What she's saying is enslaved people were human beings.
Yeah.
They had parents, they may have had children, There were people that loved them. At some point, they were someone's bouncing baby boy or darling daughter. They may have been their beloved father or their adored mother. They may have been a wise grandfather or grandmother who helped take care of them when they were young, when the children were young. But the fact is, they were people. They had names, they lived, they were born, they may have gotten married,
Big fact. We're gonna
they died. They're not
subscribe to him. Just
some anonymous group of people out there in the universe uh, without a history. The problem with this is we've forgotten them. We have lost.
Before
so what we're gonna do is we'll Google that. Come here, Google. Come here, Google. All right, I want to see where are slave records stored? Stored in North and South. But this is my people is from. They started in South Carolina, Pageland, and then they started going north through Charlotte, all up to D.C., New York, Greensboro. Let's say information about plantations can be located in public records such as agriculture and slave census records, deeds and plats, wills and inventories and equity. Let's see where they located. A National Archives and Records Administration, as a custodian of the permanently valuable records of the U.S. federal government, holds a wide variety of records that may help African Americans identify slaveholders and ancestors who were enslaved before 1865. The National Archives and Records Administration. Ah, how do I find slave records in North Carolina? Local records, i.e., the county records in North Carolina, are the most fruitful for genealogists. These records, these record marriages of owners, deeds of gift or deeds of trust of slaves, purchase or sale of slaves, transfers of land among family members, property, and records of actions in the local county records, in the local county courts. Okay. How to find slave records in South Carolina. Private plantation records consist of personal papers and business records of the slave owner. Two two repositories in the state which hold large collections of plantation records are the South Carolina Library at the University of South Carolina and the South Carolina Historical Society in Charleston. Chucktown, Chucktown, Chucktown. Big salute, Charleston. So whatever state you in, or wherever you could trace where your people, what state your people first started in, yeah, we on to something. So we need to trace our ancestors, y'all. So make sure you leave me a comment. If you got any recommendations, I know everybody doing the DNA test and all that. Um, but I think I'd rather do this footwork first. Yeah, I think I'd rather do this footwork first instead of taking the easy route doing the DNA. I want to know what ships my folks came on, and that way I can know for sure, for sure. I won't, just be guessing off DNA. I want to know what all tribes my people mix with. What all blood we mix with. Man. So big salute everybody, man. Like, share, subscribe. If you feel like any information here was useful, make sure you share. Please hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. And just hit that like button just because it's there. It's free. Hit that like button. It's free. So big salute. Support Goon, support Squad, loved ones. Big salute all my big angels. And big salute to the righteous revolutionaries. And big salute to everybody that's been tuning in, tapping in, man. Like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe. Hey, like, share, subscribe. Hey, cause the party don't start till we step in. I love y'all, man. Y'all stay tuned for the ancestors. Hey, rep hard, rep hard.